Thank you very much, Cecile, and thank you, everyone, Ngozi and Isabella, and all the very wonderful team of great leading women that I had the pleasure to chair your panel, the all-female panel. I am very pleased and honored to join you again today, and all the audience out there who are watching this session live. No other time than now is the emphasis or the importance of climate change and its and the challenges that it actually meets on different livelihoods, communities, and aspects of our life is important like now. If there was a time, now is that time. And it's great that we had this session looking at the different consequences of climate change and the different greening, programming, and resilience practices that different agencies, communities, regional governments, and institutions around this region are doing in putting on ground solutions that can transform those on the front line, those on the margins of the crisis, in order to reduce their vulnerabilities and enhance their resilience. So I'm very pleased to be with you again today. And we will be looking at the different questions that perhaps our audience have thrown in this session and how we can get our panelists to answer these questions, especially to make justice to this topic. And I will perhaps just restart again by asking you all to just introduce yourself one after the other. Perhaps if there are people who are coming new on this session, to know each one of you. I am Tabi Jordan. I am the coordinator of Green Aid and the Billion Trees for Africa project, which is a frontline project working with the Great Green Wall in restoring dryland ecosystems across the entire Sahel, in ensuring, most importantly, that green growth is created, resilience practices are actually reaching the end miles on the community's front line and bringing green jobs and income for the benefit of all the people. So thank you very much for having me as your moderator. Cecile, will I start with you and the rest to introduce themselves, then we can go into the question and answer session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this nice introduction. So I'm Cecile Loriou, and I'm working as a disaster risk specialist, disaster risk management specialist for the World Bank, and especially in food system resilience project, which is a regional project throughout West Africa that we are preparing at the moment. And it's a long-term project that we hope to deliver by the end of this year. And this project also is willing to have a comprehensive approach to food security as it relates also to climate change, and bringing together experts from agriculture, experts more in disaster risk as I am, and we are particularly more in charge of everything related to climate information and digital agriculture, hydromet information, and also everything related to markets. So maybe I'll stop here, but I'm very happy to be on this panel today, and I'll let my other colleagues introduce themselves.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cecile. It's really wonderful to have you. Can I have Ngozi follow, please?
Yes, a pleasure to see all of you again. A real pleasure. I'm Ngozi Amo. I am team leader in the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, UNOWAS, where I cover political analysis and monitoring of several countries. And I'm also leading right now a program on the impact of climate change on human security. This office is a regional political office. We are mandated by the Security Council. So this is a Security Council request, and it has involved a number of risk assessments in the region, together with the UN system and with ECOWAS and other partners, to basically ask local communities how they have been impacted by climate change in the last decade. And so I'm coming at this from a conflict prevention perspective. Again, pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much, Ngozi. It's always a great pleasure having you and hearing your very brilliant perspectives and what you do around the Sahel region, which is a biodiversity hotspot at risk of climate impact. Thank you very much. Can we have Isabella, are you there, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm Isabella Zhu from the National Observatory of Climate Change in Cameroon. We are working mainly on climatic issues, and we do predictions based on different development sectors in the country. We have activities we are doing with the Ministry of Agriculture, as well as those in charge of disaster management. We collaborate with them to be able to handle these issues. So that's how we work with other sectors at national level on anything relating to climate change.
Thank you. We're going to be going. Thank you very much, Isabella Zhu. It's great to know exactly what national governments are doing around climate prediction, which is very important in informing decisions, good green programming. You can't have any real green programming without predictions in terms of climate information services, the efficiency and the effectiveness and the precision that they can deliver on the decision-making system. You guys are really doing a great job. Thank you, Isabella. Can we have, is that Elliot? Elliot, last time we see Elliot there. Is she ready to make some contribution? Then let's go ahead. Elliot, are you there? Okay, sorry, please. Otherwise, I think our friend from Ghana is not with us now. Is she there? Can she please introduce yourself and tell us what you do? Okay. In the absence of that, we will swing straight in looking at some of the questions that have been thrown to you, the panelists. Some viewers have asked this question: how do you ensure adaptability and long-term strategies to dealing with climate, agriculture, and food security? I would like to throw this question straight to Ngozi, and because you just made mention how your program now is looking at the impacts of climate change in the region. So how do you, like, for instance, ensure adaptability and long-term strategies to dealing with climate, agriculture, and food security? 1 minute, Ngozi, please.
Thank you very much, Tabi. I think it's a very important question. It's one question that we are all struggling with, because with climate change, the whole idea is about the ability to address the different climate shocks, both the ones that are immediate onsets, whether it's a typhoon or a immediate flooding, or whether it's more of a long-term slow onsets, such as droughts that we see very much in the Sahel. And I wanted to just start by saying that the way in which we are looking at this issue from UNOWA's perspective it's a bit broader. It's in terms of human security. So it goes beyond just food security, and it's really looking at an individual's ability to have access to health, security, to work, the whole person's ability to feel secure and in safety, and for survival. And so I think that one of the things that we see in West Africa and the Sahel, probably if you compare with other regions, is that the individual is very much at the forefront, and it's very much the local response that comes first. In many places like the Sahel, the governments might be absent or have difficult access to communities and villages. So there's an extra burden put on the individual. So I think in that sense, to answer this question about short-term and long-term, I think it's so important to look at what the individual can do and what they cannot do, because I think that this is where we see how we in the international community and among our different partners can have different added value in supporting a response that is sustainable. For example, in the risk assessments that we are currently carrying out, we've interviewed communities where they asked for very simple things to be able to deal with, let's say, an onset of a heat wave. We were talking to people in Niger, for example. And I think sometimes it's just about connecting the dots between different partners. So there's actually in Niger, government agencies that are addressing some of these issues, but often there is a gap. So I think that, I think depends, it's contextual, depends on the situation, but I think a lot of times it is about bringing different actors together for those different circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you, Ngozi. Thank you for your very brilliant response to that. I will go very quickly to Cecile. Cecile, we have seen very much like Ngozi is talking about, the heat waves. It's not just heat waves.
Sorry, Terry, I think you froze.
Waves. We've seen in some cases, we have seen in some cases, not just heat waves, we've seen rain deficit, and in other circumstances, we see excess rain that alters the entire landscape and producing different consequences of climate variability. So from the World Bank perspective, as a very strong contributor to action and resilience efforts around this region, how are you ensuring, or how do we better ensure adaptability in terms of pushing very quickly towards food security and climate adaptation?
It's a good question, although to me it's not very clear what we mean by adaptability, because we use adaptation also. But I agree with Ngozi that we really have, if we want to make a long-term change, we need to train the communities, really. We need to rely on the knowledge of community, and we need to rely also and be very clear on what is the responsibility of the governments and what can be I would say at the first responder level, and how we can empower first responders, especially, well, my specialty is more in disaster risk management, and we work particularly with floods. It's extremely important to work with local government. For example, I'm a strong believer that local government can have a tremendous impact on the future change, the climate change notably. And although the World Bank is usually working with government, Ministry of Economies, we more and more have the tendency to approach local governments, cities, and secondary cities notably, and see how we can reinforce, strengthen them, and improve their capacity in managing disaster when they arrive, in adapting their cities to climate change. How they, we are working a lot in greening of cities also to reduce heat and reduce the heat islands, notably. And also we're trying to see how we can involve the citizens and the community in those initiatives. So it's not only a matter of the central government providing the right legislative environment for that. It's not only the city creating, adapting at the urban level for climate change, but it's also how you make citizens really part of this process. When we're talking about building of the cities, sometimes we can involve citizens in doing so, and also how you train them to be able to respond, to have the best response possible and as adequate as possible when you have a disaster coming. So I think, yes, if you want to have a long-term strategy, you need to think through different scales. You cannot just address the problem at the central level. You really need to have a end-to-end approach, as we say. That's an hydromet jargon, but I think it can be used in a broader way. And that's one of the most important points. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Cecile. I'll come back to you, perhaps just to add, maybe you might like to add a little more. So, like, how can responders ensure communities' voices are amplified and involved in the process of disaster response?
You're asking me? Sorry. Yes, or I wasn't sure, Tabi. Is the question for me, or?
Yes, I'm saying, just to add to what you said, you talked so much about how individuals or people on the front line should be very involved, and how much how much their contributions really matters. And I felt that's a really great aspect, or something that needs to be well considered. And I was just asking you, how can responders ensure communities' voices are amplified? How can these voices be well amplified and involved in the process of disaster response?
Well, I will take an example for that, because we at the bank are working a lot with the crews. I guess you probably know this initiative. It's Climate Risk Early Warning System Initiative. And the cruise is a fund that we are managing with WMO and UNSDR. And one of the key aspects that we are trying to introduce with that is capacity building at the community level. And in Niger and Mali, we have worked with women leaders from remote areas, and we have trained those women to be able to recognize the signs of potentially a disaster coming, and they are themselves the relays to the communities, and they did a tremendous job at bringing the messages in terms of disaster risk management throughout the communities. And we really think that it's tremendously important to rely on in that case on community leaders, and this is the best way we can have a community involved in the process of disaster response. At least this is how we approach it here at the bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. I love that. I love that aspect where you talk about the communities really taken into consideration at the local level in terms of their contribution, and that sounds really good. And I am very pleased. And perhaps Isabella, this really relates so much to what you guys are doing, because your prediction services are not just for other other agencies, but most importantly, to inform the decisions of governments and communities. So I may just want to hear from you, or Isabel, could you highlight to us exactly how the community voices, are amplified in your responses, and how the communities are first involved in the process of the disaster response, if such exists within the National Observatory of Cameroon, please. Thank you. Do we have Isabella? Isabel, are you hearing me? I think Isabel should be having some network challenges. Isabel, are you there?
I'm there. I'm there.
Okay, so
Can
I was
you hear
saying,
me now?
yes, did you get my question, or do I
Yeah,
come
I
back?
got your question.
Okay,
It was
excellent.
on disaster response, right?
Yes, I wanted to just say, like, you are the observatory, and definitely all your prediction, your forecasting, and different advisories that you give in terms of, your weekly and monthly decisions, are they just for governments, or how do you relate these to communities? If you do that, how does the community voices comes in, and how do you involve communities in the process of response?
In the process of response, we try to pass through the community radio stations. So we have kind of created committees that work directly and gives this information to their different community radio stations. And this comes back to us through the network that has been put in place. And also at the level of the administration, when they don't only go after a disaster, but also the fact that we are able to predict these disasters, the different administrations concerned uses this in their different domains and to help so that the impact should be reduced. So that's how we try to handle the situation at the level of the National Observatory.
That sounds really good, Isabel. And yes, now when in the process of response, do you involve communities in disaster response, or just the authorities, just the administrative authorities that go on the field to do the response activities? If so, how, what processes, how do you get them involved in the processes?
Well, it is a clear fact that it is the community is involved at all levels, whether it is through the local committees or organizing meetings or going to the field to work directly with them. After we have given the information, there is a separate government department that is in charge of this response. That is the Ministry of Territorial Administration, takes this and follows it directly with the community, and we see how they work directly with the communities.
Thank you very much, Isabella. So now I will move very quickly to my dear friend Cecile. Cecile, I understand the World Bank is doing really great around this region, and you've repeatedly mentioned some very key, important actions around meteorology and different stakeholders, how this combination of the synergies are actually influencing different actions and results. But I want to just know, how do you combine communities, talents, and knowledge, especially traditional knowledge and practices, with new technology and innovation around getting these actions on the ground?
Thank you, David. I think it's very important to be acquainted and take into account traditional knowledge. Sometimes we think that we're arriving with new technologies, and this is going to be the ultimate solution. But truth is that many of the communities that we are working with already have their own ways of, predicting things and knowing when, they would talk to you about the change of color of the water, and they say, when the color turn this, we know that we're going to have a flooding or landslide or whatever. I mean, and this is very important. We've been working a lot with some specialists at the bank on behavioral approach, and not specifically for the project I'm working with right now, but we are exploring that. And this approach really is trying to get the drivers of why a community would act in this or this way. We did the work, for example, in Haiti, where we came to villages and really tried to understand why people would evacuate or not in the case of a disaster, and if they don't, what would be the driver for their decision. So again, I think it's extremely important to know those drivers, whether it's to address risk or it's for farmers when they decide to sow at this time of the year or another. But at the same time, it's also very important to bring to them the technology. And nowadays, the best way to bring technology to the end users is through the widely use of smartphone, of course, because this is easier. So we are exploring that, for example, in Mali, where we have put a platform and we are distributing smartphones to farmers association. So we can combine both the traditional knowledge, but also information from the Met Agency and from various experts, so that they can make adequate decision for, and in that case, for farmers and for their itineraries, technical itineraries. Thank you, Tali.
Thank you very much, Cecile. I think we've all really gone 360 around the key areas that needed to be looked at. Very brilliant and in-depth responses from this. Just perhaps 30 seconds for each of you to say what will you think should be what will your key message, like a key takeaway from this conversation? What is that very strong highlight that you like to send out there, like maybe a call to action to everyone? So whether your institution or the governments or regional governments or individuals. We're starting with you, Isabella. Just 30 seconds, please. We are running out of time, so I would like to hear your key takeaway. If for you, Isabella, if African governments, Isabella, for you, if any African governments will learn something from Cameroon, what is that one thing that you think you guys are doing very exemplary, you think other governments will learn? Very briefly, one short statement, please. Thank you.
The fact that we are able to produce timely climatic information that it has been successful for the past 5 years, I think is something that to be applauded at. And also the fact that we are able to detect the climate space, that's the gap that may happen when there's during planting seasons. That has been very useful in the agricultural sector. And we have been able to produce a long-term predictions and then follow up by shorter predictions. That helps also to orientate farmers on when to spray their crops for those who need to spray insecticides. It has really been useful, and I think other African countries can also do this.
Thank you very much. Cecile, to you, what are your perspective that you think are needed, or maybe call to action from you?
Well, I guess you said it very well. We need synergies. We need all levels to work together, and we need to think long term. we cannot have sequences of small projects, and also between donors, we more and more need to talk together and align our projects so that we can really support countries in Africa, and especially in the Sahel, and it is very important aspect of food security.
Thank you very much. And Ngozi, please, what is that very key thing that you think that your agency has done so great that you think, if upscaled, can bring tremendous short and long-term response in that region, especially in the Sahel, that you think needs serious emphasis around? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really like that last question about bringing modernity and tradition together. And I think what we are trying to do in UNOWAS is to use a multidisciplinary approach, so that I work in political, but I have colleagues who work on development issues, on gender issues, and so on. And so I think for that example of tradition and modernity, I think it's especially important, we've noticed in our field work, that when you look at issues related to food security and human security, that there are also other entry points to consider. For example, we've learned through UN Women that only 15% of women own land. So if you're addressing all these issues of adaptability, you also have to consider the rights that different members of the community have, the access that differs between women and men. And so I think all of that requires a very in-depth and integrated approach to understand, and to basically accept we don't have all the answers, but I think the way forward is really to try to find solutions, in the midst of that and the combinations of that. And you need flexible financing and really empowerment in the innovation for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Flexible financing, combination of traditional knowledge with modern science, innovation, and synergies, as well as really building on long-term goals and avoiding the most often disjointed short-term non-sustainable approaches. I think this is really wonderful from all of you. I want to say thank you very much to Ngozi, Cecile, and Isabella. We've done serious, in-depth analysis around this subject. I look forward to getting more questions from our viewers out there. If you have other questions you want to share, please feel free to share the questions. The moderators, our organizers are still taking questions, and which will share to the panelists, and you can still have your questions answered at any time. It's really wonderful, and having all of you here on all-female panel for that matter. I'm really grateful. Thank you. Have a very wonderful day.